pleasure to have Dara Nasr with us for the latest in our Inspire series. Having studied law, he's carved out a very successful career in the media industry. He headed up the sales team at YouTube and Display before moving to Twitter, where he was appointed managing director in 2016, a post he continues to hold. Dara is married with 2 daughters, and in a rather disturbing development, I've recently discovered that his dog shares the same name as me. The contributor to his LinkedIn profile describes him as a surprising character, so that bodes well for this afternoon's chat. Dara, it's a pleasure to have you joining us. Dara, can I start by taking you back to your own school days? Would you mind describing what you were like at school? What sort of student were you?
Well, I think I loved school, actually. But I think I was interested in lessons and learning and everything, but I really just enjoyed the fun side, whether it be sport or just mucking about with mates. I think I'm an only child, so actually I didn't have brothers and sisters to play with at home. So actually going to school, I just found hugely fun, if anything. And I think on the back of that, I was mildly distracting, easy to distract. But yeah, loved it.
Excellent. Well, that's good to hear. As a teacher, I love that, of course. Can you think back to what your ambitions were as you were sort of heading out of school, I guess? I mean, what were your sort of thoughts about what the future would bring you?
Yeah, it's funny you should say that. Much to the kind of sad and much to the concern of my mother. So my mother was the breadwinner in our house, very driven, ambitious, etc. My dad was far more laid back, and I think I'm a combo of both of them. And to this day, I'm not one of those people who have 5-year plans or anything. So I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I didn't yearn to do what I'm doing now, and I think I just wanted to kind of carry on my education, go to university and see what happened. Not necessarily the best approach, but it worked for me. And actually it helped me in later life because I didn't have those plans. I ended up doing things that maybe someone who was on my path wouldn't have done. Right.
Can we linger on school just for a bit longer?
Sure.
What do you think the most important thing was that you learned at school? If you were to look back and say, what did you really take from school?
I think a couple of things. I went to a private school, and I think when I went to university, I realised how lucky I was for going to a private school. Essentially what the school did is they set me up to succeed in terms of they would get me to a certain level, and then anything over and above was up to me. And I found that a lot of the people I met at university had to work so much harder and had to fight so much harder. So I felt very lucky. But what was my key learning from school? I think doing stuff you like, doing subjects you like is very helpful. Because if you're going to be, at somewhere for 60-70% of your week, you might as well have the most kind of fun and be the most passionate you can whilst you're there.
Yeah. Oh, that's a nice message for people to hear, I think. So you went on to study law. But as far as I can tell, you chose not to pursue a strictly legal career. Was that like a conscious decision, or was this part of your evolving 5-year plan that you've just spoken about?
Yeah, a bit of both, really. Well, when I was at school, I didn't know what I wanted to do at university. Careers advisors suggested that law was a good degree. It had weight in terms of getting up, jobs that weren't necessarily obviously within law, but also within the world of business. And so I went into it, and I suppose the day I started university, I suppose I had this kind of romantic notion of becoming a very successful lawyer, whether it be solicitor or barrister, and doing all of this. And then I realised after a few weeks it probably wasn't as glamorous as I thought it would be, and the vast majority would be contract analysis and various things like that. And whilst I enjoyed the subject, I realised quite early on it wasn't for me as a profession.
Right. So it sounds to me as if it wasn't a difficult decision not to put your degree into action. Do you still think some of the degree and the training that you received as part of the degree still plays a role in your life now?
1,000,000%. I think the advice that was given to me by the careers advisor was, vocationally, it's a good degree to have. And I think it taught me a few things that I use all the time, whether it be helping presentations, negotiation, all the way down to doing a tax return. We were doing stuff like, and obviously you could study jurisprudence, kind of like the philosophy of law, and it is a very broad subject. So absolutely, yes.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I think a lot of people find that, don't they? They probably go in a different direction, but they take the skills and a knowledge with them that turns out to be very useful. Would you mind talking us through how you came out to start in media then? How did you make that jump from law to working in the field of media?
Sure. So after I finished my degree, I didn't know what I wanted to do. So I went back home and I got a temp job. And my mother was a headhunter, and I had the opportunity to do a postgraduate, which she said would be good. Again, on the CV, I didn't know what else I wanted to do, and as I was doing a temp job in a small town called Marlow, it's about 30 miles from London, and so I did a postgraduate. When I finished my postgraduate, again, I was no nearer to actually knowing what I wanted to do, and then I started applying to stuff like banking and various stuff like that. And my mum and dad was like, "Oh, right, great. Why is it? Are you interested in it?" And I said, "No, not at all, really." And they said, "Oh, well, why did I apply?" And I said, "Well, it seemed like the right, a good job." And then and they said, "Oh, well, okay," but they're a bit concerned again. They didn't. And then a few friends that I went to school with actually were in media, and I saw them, and they had known me since I was pretty young, and they said, "You would love media. You should go for that." So I went to a few recruitment consultants, and that's how I got into it.
Right. So it wasn't quite the big break that movies like to portray, I guess. People, careers in media seem to have that big romance about them, don't they? Where, it's relying on maybe bumping into someone in an elevator or something. It was purely through a recruitment consultant. And what was that first post that you had then?
Yeah, I worked for a TV company, which latterly got acquired by Virgin Media. But essentially, I had a few different options, and it was either on the sell or the buy side, really, to make it easy. And my friends, and I was more attracted to the sell side. My friends advised that would be the best thing. And I had an interview at a radio station and 2 TV stations. One was Carlton TV, which is part of ITV at the time, so the biggest player in the game. And one was a company called Flextech Television, which is the one I joined, which was a satellite. We had to sell 21 different satellite stations, and then it kind of got sold off to Sky, bit of Channel 4, Virgin, as I say. So, yes, I went for that one. I had offers from all, but I went for that one.
Right. Okay. It's nice to have choice, isn't it?
Yeah, it was nice. I think the reason I went for it, funny enough, was everyone there seemed really happy. Actually, and it was a real kind of energy and a vibe to it, which I loved.
Yeah, that's key in the workplace. We might come back to that theme later on.
Sure.
What advice would you give to young people wanting to get into the media profession? Because our perception from the outside in, and I may be wrong, is it's quite a competitive field to break into. Is there any top tips for how to get into media?
Yeah, it really is. It is competitive to get into, and probably more competitive than when I was starting out. But it's also incredibly vibrant, fast growing, very kind of energetic fun. You do a really diverse a set of things. I couldn't advise it highly enough. In terms of top tips, I think working on a product you're passionate about is preferable, but not always possible. But also, I think strong digital knowledge nowadays. I think that people who are in their teens now and leaving university will have such strong knowledge of devices, how to use devices, how they can work, back end, front end. And when I joined, it was far more linear, it's far more analog. It was more art than science, and it still is very art, still art, but there's a lot of data and science. And if you can marry the two, then you have a real advantage. So someone has I suppose the unicorn, the analytical and creative mind, but there's space for both, really.
Yeah. Flexibility, I guess, moving between the two, as you say. Yeah,
that's right.
I imagine you must employ some young people, some fairly recent graduates, or even younger. I mean, what are you looking for in a young person in terms of qualities or attitude, or maybe away from skills? Is there sort of something that you're looking for that separates people?
Yeah, I think firstly we're trying to really employ from a diverse kind of. We're trying to create a really diverse workplace. Not just gender, not just ethnicity, but background, age, disability, whatever it is. Not just because we think that's what we should do, not just because articles say the more diverse your workplace is, the more productive it is. But we don't just want a set of drones. We don't just want everyone to be the same, because realistically, then everyone's going to think the same, and you can't be right all the time. So having different viewpoints is good. So yes, so we're trying to do that. So different backgrounds and everything is good. I think when employing people, when I've worked places and we've had grads come in or young people come in, the ones that really stood out are the positive ones, the real kind of not just can-do attitude, but one with a smile on your face. And because I think positivity or negativity is really infectious. It doesn't matter if you're the most senior person, the most junior person. If the most junior person sits next to the most senior person and is negative all day, that senior person, it will rub off on them, and vice versa. Positivity works that way. And actually, I think, when we have young people come in and they're so energetic and positive, it kind of removes some of the kind of naturally built up cynicism that everyone, including myself, everyone develops throughout the years. So yeah, I really look for someone energetic, positive, fun, really.
Yeah, no, I can see that. Can I just go back to your earlier point? That was interesting about looking to build diversity within your company. So sometimes it might be a hard message to get across to somebody that you haven't employed them, not because of, I guess, who they are, but they may not bring the kind of diversity that you're looking for. Is that a tricky message to get across to young people?
Not really. I think look, we're trying to employ the best candidates, but we're trying to look in as broad a pool as we can. And it's not necessarily all about people getting first from Oxbridge, and I think it's not necessarily, you just have to be honest when you give the messages. Sometimes a person was better for that role. Doesn't mean they're a better person, just more suited to that role, or at least the interviewing panel thought so. So
that's the feedback, isn't it?
Yeah.
I think you've done some mentoring of young people outside of your organisation, haven't you? Do you feel that that's an important thing for someone in a position such as yours? Is it important to make that connection with a younger generation?
Yeah, I think so. I think anything you can. The best gifts are gifts that are easy to give and valuable to receive, aren't they? The kind of, I don't necessarily the best gifts, but they're easy. Gifts that are easy to give and valuable to receive. It's kind of like a no-brainer. You should do it. And I think, as I said, I realised when I went to university how lucky I've been in my life, in my schooling, in my university, in my career. And some people don't have that luck or privilege or whatever it is. If there's anything I can do to give back, it's brilliant. Actually, there's a charity called the Media Trust that works with loads of different charities. They represent loads of little small charities, companies, whatever it is, to get them savvy in marketing and various other things. And I went to a presentation by them, and someone who'd worked with them for 20 years said, I've done mentoring every year for 20 years. And by the way, every year I'm pretty sure I get more out of it than the mentor. And I wanted to test that actually as well. I thought, I wonder if this is just hot air or whether, and I've got to say, by and large, it's really true.
Right. Yeah.
You don't realise what you can, I was mentoring a young guy who was an actor producer. I've never done acting outside of school. I've never produced any creative content. And I was thinking there's literally nothing I can teach. I've done something totally different. He was in his early 20s and I felt like an imposter, genuinely. But after about a session or 2 sessions, I realized that he wasn't just an actor or a producer. He was 22 and I've been 22. And I had similar struggles to him when I was 22. And some of his struggles were around confidence in communicating with people. And as you get older, sometimes you become more confident. But when you're younger and there's the big boss person and you have to speak to them, it's nerve-wracking. And it's those kind of experiences I could help him with. So yes, really, it is rewarding.
How did you build that confidence, do you think? Was it something that just evolved, or did you do something conscious in your early 20s to get more confident?
Yeah, a few things. Luck again. So, my parents are hugely supportive and give you a sense of confidence. I think on top of that, I mentioned the law. You would get taught about presentation. You'd get taught about communication. I think if you can communicate well, concisely, whatever it is you're wanting to do impactfully, that can help with confidence. And I think the first company I worked for was just superb, and they really they were fantastic at training, and they gave you such great foundations that when you necessarily met someone else from another company, you notice they didn't have it, you get a sense of confidence as well. So yeah, it's a lot of it. I was again lucky, kind of by osmosis, but some of it as well, self-taught. Presenting is quite a big part of our role. And when I was at my first company, I did a presentation just to a small group. And then my boss's boss said, "Oh, do you want to a few more people?" I said, "How many?" And it was like, they said 20 or 30. I said, "Fine." And actually it was about 200 on the day. And I was so nervous, but I did it and it went well. And then, if you remember, I thought, well, okay, I can do that now. And sometimes if I start feeling nervous, I think back to that moment. So experience makes you more confident. Learning from failure makes more confident. I think that's the other thing as well. Not being scared to fail is huge. If you're not scared to fail, failure is not the issue. It's not learning from failure is the issue. So, and once you go through that, I think you become more confident too.
Do you still get nervous when you have to get up in front of a big room of people?
Yeah, not yes and no. I mean, it would be a lie to say totally, "Oh no, I'm fine. I could do." As long as I'm prepared, as long as I'm confident about what I'm going to do, then I don't really get nervous now. But, there's still a bit of anxiety, but it's positive anxiety, anticipation, call it what you will. And I do get thrill from it, I must admit.
Yeah, it can become something quite enjoyable, which is what a lot of young people who are still struggling with developing that confidence. It's hard to visualize at that age, isn't it? But I know what you mean. As teachers, we tend to assume that the workplace is going to change a lot over the next 10, 12 years. That's our understanding. I don't know if you'd agree with that, and if you see the workplace in general and people's jobs and the way they work changing, how do you see the future coming about? Because, what would our, say, 15-year-old students be facing when they're in their mid-20s, do you think, when maybe they're in their first job after graduating?
Well, I think we can all recognise that it's not just going to change a bit in 10 to 15 years. It's going to change fundamentally this year based on what we're experiencing today. I work for a tech company. Working from home is something that a lot of engineers do. It's part of, we know it works, but it hasn't been widespread, and it doesn't happen 100% of the time with 100% of the people. Now it's happening 100% of the time, and it's working. I think it's going to be a much bigger part of everyone's life moving forward. But there are industries like banking, where the culture's typically, if you're not at your desk, if you're not in the office, it's not considered work. It's a sweeping generalization, but there are industries like that are going to change fundamentally. So virtual working is a thing. It is productive. So I think that'll be a big thing. When I first started, if you couldn't work from home, there was no mobile internet. Home internet was narrowband. It wasn't broadband. You had a desktop that was stuck on a desk. There's no portability. Things are just becoming far easier. You can pretty much do everything on a mobile phone now, by and large. So the mobility aspect is going to be huge. And that's why, again, having a great knowledge of how these things work will put you in an advantageous position, not just doing a video conference, let's say, but what are good apps to use? How can you do things in a seamless way? And I think, so I think it's going to be big. The one thing I would say to add on to that, and this is I think as important for schools that have been homeschool, virtually teaching and stuff like that, is there's a big sense that working from home and everything can be really really productive. But there's a massive sense of camaraderie and creativity that you miss from not being in a room with other people, I find. When I'm in the office and there's a conversation going on, it might have nothing to do with work. It can create a buzz. It can create camaraderie. It can create a great atmosphere. I think that's missed sometimes virtually, or is not as easy to create.
How would you create it? How would you keep that in your company? Because that was what I was going to ask you. There must be some pitfalls with everyone working remotely.
Yeah, I think it's fine because ultimately we're going back, and I think that it's okay for us because we all kind of know each other from before anyway. So this is a shared experience. I think where it becomes different is for new starters. If someone started this week, last week, the week before, they don't know anyone and no one knows them. And it's harder to get to know someone's character from a virtual call or feel psychologically safe. And what I mean by that is if you've worked in an office where the culture is you're not allowed to log off until 5:30, but our rules are slightly different. We're a bit more autonomous, etc. If you're that new person coming from the old world, how do you adapt to that new culture if you want to? It's hard to experience it. It's harder to experience it virtually if you're new. But it's a job for us all to kind of maintain. We're trying to communicate more. We're trying to do stuff like that. But yeah, it's as this is unprecedented, a word that's bandied around a lot at the moment. It's hard to know all the answers about trial and error, really.
Yes, it's taking it bit by bit, isn't it? I think that's how most people are living their lives at the moment.
Absolutely.
So as a manager of people, I think you manage a company of over 200 people, don't you? I think.
Yeah, London is over 300, yeah.
A big company full of people. What's your priority as a people manager? What's sort of your guiding principle? Is there anything that keeps you going in the style of manager that you want to be?
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I try to be approachable. I think I've been there 7 years. I know a lot of the people there. It's not like I was airlifted in my position. I kind of went up the ranks slightly, and I think that I try to maintain that. What I mean by maintain that is not to forget that. I think giving people trust and flexibility is massively beneficial to the staff and to the company broad. And the reason I say that is we have people, for example, when we went on lockdown, I found that two groups of people were suffering the most. People in their 20s living by themselves in a flat in London, probably a small flat, no garden in this heat, anything like that. They were suffering. They're living there because they want to go out. They're not living there because they want to stay in, and they can't. And I think young parents were really struggling, especially mothers that felt duty bound to work and look after their kids because of years of kind of patriarchy and all that. There's a guilt that mothers, which is totally unjust. They should, guilt that they felt that often the fathers didn't. And I think they struggled, that I was hearing. So we did a couple of things, so we kind of said no internal meeting should be longer than half an hour, because if they have to homeschool, if people have to homeschool, people have to look after their kids. Also, if anyone wants to miss an internal meeting because of stress around schooling or their kids, acting up or whatever it is, that should take priority. And giving them that is the thing. I think doing those kind of things creates a level of trust and respect. And ultimately, when people work, they work harder, I think. So it's a relationship. It's a two-way thing. It's not just the managers tell you what to do and you do it. You know, it's about working together to create the best environment and what works for the individual, I think, and the company.
Would you mind sharing with me what you think has been one of your toughest moments as a people manager in your career?
Yeah, I think the single toughest was at the end of 2016. We had to make a load of people redundant in the London office. And what was very tough about it was these are people I started with, you know, in an office of 20 people, and we expanded out, and there are a lot of people that I started with, people I count as my friends, not just colleagues or ex-colleagues. And, you know, you're delivering that message, and it's very, very tough. And because not only you have to look after them, but they're the remainder of the people, the other, you know, however many percent that you need to motivate. And it's hard to motivate people when you're not feeling positive yourself, and it's a tough time, you know. But yeah, again, a huge learning as well. But it was very tough. Yeah.
Yeah, and I can only imagine. On the other side of things, what's been one of the best parts of managing people? What's been one of the high points for you?
Just working with great people, you know, being able to help people, seeing people develop, but just, you know, I think if you work with incredible people, you learn from them as much as they learn from you, and you get a sense of pride. You know, I've worked with some of the people in my team. I've never ceased to be amazed by how amazing they are, and how much they care, and it's just really rewarding. And when you can help them, it's fantastic. Yeah.
Oh, lovely. It would be remiss of me not to ask you about tweeting, I guess, given the business
Sure.
you're in.
Sure.
What makes for a good tweet, or even a great tweet in your view? You know, what's really an eye-catching tweet, one worth reading in general?
Well, it's interesting. You know, it depends. It depends who you are, but there was actually a research report done by Carnegie Mellon University where I believe, and I might get these figures slightly wrong, but I think directionally they're correct. 1,500 people who were on Twitter were tested. They were shown something like 40,000 different tweets by 2,500 different people who tweet, and they had to basically comment on why something was worth reading or something wasn't worth reading. And I think that 82% said that the worst tweets were boring, but I think almost 50% said the good tweets are informative, and then behind that 25% were funny or amusing. And I think for me, you know, when you read something funny, it's really good. But yeah, informative's the big one. Sharing stuff, you know, Twitter's ultimately a breaking news site. You know, the vast majority of our users get their news first on Twitter. So
informative, but giving you a laugh.
Yeah, I mean, I like that. No, but, you know, I like that stuff. You know, cheers you up kind of thing.
Yeah. Who's a good tweeter, if that's the right word? Who's a good tweeter to follow? Who would you recommend?
Yeah. So if you like a laugh, it's kind of a guy called Alistair Green, at Mr. Alistair Green. He's a comedian. But what's phenomenal about him is he's not, you know, with no disrespect to him, he's my favourite, but I don't think he was particularly famous before this. So he's built his career essentially on the likes of Twitter. So he's a master at tweeting. And he's brilliant at capturing something that's going on in the world and making it amusing without being too aggressive or whatever. But that's just my style. I like, he's good. I like, you know, I'm a child, or, you know, a 20-year-old of the 90s. So I like Liam Gallagher. He's quite funny. He's very, as you'd expect him to be. And then, you know, I like sport. So I like breaking sport stuff. So yeah, all those kind of things. I think it's just getting, you know, what we say, it's kind of like the shortest distance between you and what interests you most.
Yeah, well, that's a lovely note to finish on. I feel we've just sort of scratched the surface this afternoon. I'm sure you've got lots more that you could tell us about what must be a really fascinating industry to work in. But thank you very much.
No worries.
Really, really interesting. I really appreciated your candor as well along the way.
No, it's a real privilege to be asked. So hope everyone's well, and thank you for the offer.
You too. Stay safe. Thank
Take
you.
care.
Bye.
Bye bye.